Hey everyone, Michelle Francesca here. This is Inspiration for Life, and in this video we're going to be talking about releasing attachment to expectations. Releasing attachment to specific outcomes, outdated expectations. We've been talking a lot about letting go recently, and letting go doesn't always involve packing a bag and making a dramatic exit. Not every step in our transformation needs to be some huge sweeping reform or an earth-shattering change, though it certainly might include that in this season. But powerful transformation can be initiated when we release attachments to expectations, outdated expectations of how a certain relationship should look, how a specific outcome should come about. And transformation can come about through the most gentle shifts of perspective, focuses, energy expenditure to make room for the person we've now become. In these times, we are honoring, perhaps like never before, the I am that I now am, the person that I've become. And we are learning to reconfigure our emerging sense of personhood in relation to the people in our lives, the situations that we're in, vocations, values, etc. Some are needing to leave, we're needing to make a complete cutting away, and others are being reconfigured. These relationships are being reconfigured. Well, releasing attachments to expectations is an important part of our personal transformation process. And I am not talking about flatlining in numb hopelessness or no longer activating faith in vision, for desires to be fulfilled. I'm not talking about becoming lazy or tolerating justice or just sitting back and saying, "Okay, Sarah, Sarah." No, of course, expectations, hopes are very important. They are the substance and the outworking of our faith and our creative power. But what I'm talking about in terms of releasing attachments to expectations in this video is really that retrieval of our power, where we've given it away, where we've put it into things outside of ourselves that we've discovered we cannot coerce, force, or control. And we're finding that we have perhaps put expectation or power or expectancy towards something that is consistently not meeting our expectations. In fact, we're getting a wake-up call that not only is it not going to meet our expectation, it has no intention of doing so whatsoever, and it's going to continue to give us that feeling of being let down. And that's really a waste of energy focus for us. So, for example, if we've placed an expectation or trust in someone or something, and that expectation is consistently not being met for whatever reason, there is a coming to terms, there's a reckoning moment, and then it's appropriate for us to let go of our attachment to that expectation, to that specific outcome, and hone back our power and put it in something more fruitful and productive. When this happens, there is definitely a sense of loss. There's a grief that we have to bear when we're saying this or that or so-and-so isn't what I thought, what I wanted, what I tried so hard to make them to be. And we become weary, right, of our own self-delusion that's driving us to maintain this grasping, this attachment to a certain expectation or desired outcome. When that grief comes about, there's a letting go, there's a processing that needs to take place. Or if we're not careful, that pain, the pain that's generated gets suppressed, and then that same kind of expectancy reoccurs in other relationships and in other things. I call it the emotional whack-a-mole. Sometimes the expectations that we're carrying are actually in connection with unmet needs from our childhood. We fear that if someone doesn't come through for us, or a certain thing doesn't happen in a certain way, and we've deemed them powerful enough to be the sole deliverer of that need to be met, then we will put ourselves in a position where we're going to be set up for a sense of abandonment, and we fear if we don't let go, we're going to be abandoned, we're going to be rejected, we're going to be left alone, we're going to be whatever it is that childhood trauma is triggering, right? And so we need to make space in letting go of those attachments to certain expectations from certain people, from certain things. We're actually making a beautiful space for a more holistic way for those beautiful needs, those basic needs, those very reasonable needs to be satisfied. And this is the real paradigm shift that many people are experiencing. Now, I'm not saying that we're supposed to be lone rangers here, not leaning or relying on groups or institutions or whatever it might be, people, partners, to help meet our needs. Of course, we are not meant to be alone. But if we're seeing that certain things that we're just clinging to are failing us over and over again, we would do well to release our attachment to that expectation and let in a new way of that need being met. It may be something that we can give to ourselves, that we can give ourselves the love that we feel that we are lacking. It could be that a certain institution is crumbling, and our release of our attachment to it is going to aid its eradication so that something new and better can be built in its place. I have a story that I want to share with you about expectation when it all goes horribly wrong. When my children were very young, we would go to these study groups. And I have to say, and I don't mean this rudely, but there was sort of often a lot of very starchy people. It was kind of very religious. I was very religious, I think, at that time. And there was an expectation in these meetings that would just shake me to my bones, that really good parents always had children that obeyed them with military precision. So there was this expectation on my children to be absolutely perfectly behaved at these meetings, and it was a recipe for frustration and failure, because I had a 3-year-old with me who was a fabulous, free-thinking, rambunctious little thing, and did not take naturally to being tamed into numb compliance in these sort of very incarcerating situations. So much tutting, much shaming, much disappointment from the leader, and me coming home with these sort of feeling just slimed with guilt one too many times. And I realized, wait a minute, I have taken on this singular leader's expectations for my child's conduct to be perfect, and if it's not, then I'm a bad parent. And my eyes were opened. It was just frustration all around. Our Holy Spirit said to me this: would you take someone who had a physical handicap into a situation where they had to do athletics, and then they're condemned and belittled if they can't meet that expectation? And I thought, no, that's ludicrous. And the Holy Spirit said, same thing. And the lights came on, and I realized, sometimes we are just literally setting ourselves up for constant failure and disappointment, cycles of failure and disappointment. And not to mention that if we are the one exerting a certain expectation or a certain pressure on somebody to live up to our expectation, they can feel the weight of that as never feeling good enough. It can be very paralyzing to someone. It can hinder their spontaneity. It can hinder their own authenticity, because they are walking on, we feel like, we want something and we deserve it. Rightly so. Every need that we have, I'm sure it needs to be met. But if we do it in a way that we're sort of exerting a pressure on someone, that person may feel like they're walking on eggshells around us, and they don't feel welcome just as they are. And this can often create a stalemate in relationships, when the best thing to do then is to find a way to agreeably wipe the slate clean, release the presumptions and the expectations that have built up over time, that are holding us to forms of an old self that no longer is pertinent in that situation, and just plan to get to know the person all over again. accepting them without judgment for the truth of who they are. Now, we often need to do that for ourselves, as over time we form ideas, crystallize ideas in our minds about ourselves, personality constructs, if you will, and then we hold the person we imagine ourselves to be to all kinds of expectations, and I don't mean standards, but expectations that make us feel frustrated. Then we belittle ourselves, we break ourselves down, we give ourselves a hard time, when in fact we may be in an entirely different season of life where those expectations obviously cannot be met by us. That happens often to young mothers when they have young children. They still hold themselves to that. I've got to be this much weight and wear these lovely clothes every day and always, look spectacular by 7 a.m. in the morning, and it's not going to happen. We're lucky if you get in the shower by 4 p.m. in the afternoon, right? And the house is not going to be perfectly tidy. So we hold ourselves to certain expectations that we can't meet, and then find ourselves in a sort of a cycle of disappointment and feeling like we're not adding up. So I want to say, if you are in a situation that is feeling frustrating and stuck and resistant to transformation, maybe consider, is there an attachment to a specific outcome or to an expectation that either needs to be let go or reworked? When we realize that we maybe have put expectations, even judgments, on things, on people that aren't delivering, cannot deliver, because the capacity's not there, the desire's not there, life has changed them, things have changed, things are outside of our control. If we're putting our trust, all of our hope in someone to do something a certain way so we can feel satisfied, we may have a stalemate going on, and there's something that we need to release. So consider these questions. How do we release attachments to expectations without becoming hardened and lost at sea, without feeling like, I can never trust anybody or anything, right? Holding on to ourselves, but releasing the attachment to an outdated expectation. And how do we release attachments to expectations while still engaging to some degree in intimacy or collaboration with a partner, with a vocation, with a creative project? How do we let go of a certain specific outcome and still engage in that intimacy and collaboration, letting each now moment unfold and bring about perhaps new potentials that we didn't consider? And how do we navigate changes in our relationships? Changes, friends, that are inevitable if we are to really own and honor our individuation and our growth. Well, this is really the maturing work of our time, and answering these questions might involve us in quite an experimental journey of discovery. And can we call it that? Experimental. Maybe there is no one size fits all. Maybe it's something that is going to be discovered that's going to require experiment of how do we now allow our relationship, or my relationship to this thing or to this situation, to be metamorphosized so that I'm not constantly feeling frustrated. Someone maybe is not constantly feeling like they're not good enough, or a completely distant and indifferent situation is kind of not holding us hostage to them in our own minds, like we've given our power to something. So let's ask ourselves, is my expectation and my attachment to it linked to something outside of my control? Am I banging my head against a brick wall, expecting a new result, but still doing the same thing? Or can I either release that expectation, or can I lighten it? Can I rework it in a way that allows for more peace, that allows for my new self to be honored and respected, but also allows for perhaps new ways that I never considered before for those needs to be met. Whether we release completely, whether we rework something, I believe that very key is that we set our eyes on the joy, set our hearts on the joy that's set before us, that we look for new windows of opportunity that we might never have noticed with our eyes fixed so much on a certain expectation. Perhaps it's time to treat this time not as the doom and gloom moment that it sometimes feels like, but perhaps as a kairos moment, an opportune moment to actually take what's in our hand and to work it, to work with the tension of it, to cultivate it into a higher good, to work with God to cultivate our current situation into something that actually benefits us better than we could have even imagined. So let's look for the opportunity that's beckoning to us. Let's open that previously unseen window within and look through it with new eyes to new vistas, vistas that maybe we only just sensed were there, that are awaiting our delighted gaze and observation. Let's allow a new vision to surface, a vision that captivates our hearts. And let's shed the restrictive skins, the patterns of belief and behavior that are perhaps imprisoning us into a paradigm that is outdated, long lost, long since lost its luster and its relevance. You know, I believe the new paradigm that so many of us are wanting to experience, truly deep down, is honest, it's authentic, it's naturally vibrant, it's aligned with the truth of who we are, it's non-toxic. And perhaps now is the time to emerge into that new sense of self, that new world, with a clean slate of expectations. Letting the old, outdated expectations, those specific outcomes, let them go and see what might breathe in through fresh air coming in through that new window of opportunity. Whatever we no longer wish to tolerate, let's let it go. Let's put appropriate boundaries in place. Let's reestablish vision. Boundaries and vision that honor our new sense of self in God. And let's carve out new patterns of thought, new patterns of behavior that bring about healthier attachments to things that are more representative of our new sense of self. Let's move forward with openness and curiosity. Well, what might come up for us? I think perhaps some separation anxiety. We might feel like we're in the unknown. We might feel like we're walking through a no man's land wilderness, right? Neither here nor there. I know that's very true for a lot of us. We're sort of in that no man's land. We call it a wilderness. I want to call it the wild land. Let's perhaps tap back into some of the wildness that was shut down through life just doing its, regimented thing and us complying and working with it. Perhaps there's some wild land within us that needs to be untapped, a new sense of adventure reinvigorated. What perhaps to us in our younger days was like, yeah, this is an adventure. I love the unknown. Now to us is like, oh my goodness, no, this world's not safe. I can't go out there. And we've shut down some of the sense of adventure of that youthfulness. Let it be rejuvenated. Let's be like Jesus, who was led into the wilderness by the Spirit to come out in the power of the Spirit. and face his demons while he was in there, face those contrary voices, and really begin to distinguish, are my fears based on some imbalanced risk that's going to lead me down a really bad path, or are my fears actually based on a lack of tools, a lack of information? And just a lack of information is preventing me from jumping in to a new experience. Perhaps we're going to need to tap into new kinds of resources, new voices, new people, new tools that buoy our new choices and direction. I definitely think we're going to need to trust our own instincts and intuition in these days ahead. But the picture I get is a coming home to who we really are, making a home in ourselves with a foundation of authentic truth. And it's like the journey is we've got our backpack of essentials and our little animal friend, right? Whatever or whomever is encouraging us to live in that regathered sense of self, that true masterpiece, which when all the programming and the conditioning and the ways of yesteryear that aren't working have been chiseled away, that masterpiece is revealed, that was always there, ready to be the basis of our new experience that we are now creating. So, letting go, opening our hands, releasing attachments to outdated expectations, stopping to put ourselves in cycles and patterns that are just setups for disappointment over and over again. Taking back our power from putting our expectation and our hope in things that cannot deliver. This is going to be such an empowering thing for us to do. And I hope that as you consider that today, as you consider perhaps, do I have an attachment to an expectation that I need to release, that you will find inspiration through some of the words that have been spoken here today. God bless you. I hope that you hit the subscribe button. I would love to see you here again. Hit that like. It helps to get the video out. Share it out. And I hope that you will continue to live inspired. See you next time.